Hey, welcome back to Just 5 Mins, the weekend bonus edition. If you haven't already enough listening to David ramble on. But anyway, we're all building apps, websites, whatever it is, using AI, and why not? I mean, there's amazing stuff that you can now build. And like I said, you have to... Yeah, there's a few guidelines and a few things that you need to be aware of, and you still need an eye for design, really, and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, what I've got is something that on the face of it looks quite simple. But if you're not aware of skills, agent skills, that's not a agent skills, not a person, you know, like in the Matrix or something. Anyway, but Anthropic created skills, and I did just 5 minutes on it a little while ago. Oh wow, a month or two back anyway. And ultimately it's a very simplistic thing to get across, but what it is if you've got a folder structure, you can define the skills to have specific things. Like in this case, what I'm going to show, well, not show, but talk about is front-end skills, you know, front-end UI skill. Okay, but you can have a skill for anything, and what the key thing that you have to remember is you don't have to have it just for coding. It could be that you do other stuff. I don't know what it is. Maybe you're an interior designer and you've got skills about what type of fabrics and whatever. It doesn't have to be just coding. But the key thing with skills is it really is only a folder structure, and it's got a prescribed way of defining what the skill is. But there isn't really code as such to do with a skill. Okay, so it's really a set of instructions that's quite specific, but it also can be quite nested. You can say, well, for this skill, it uses this command to do this. But below that, it says, well, here's my snippet example that you must always use, and all, you know, things like that. So you can get real consistency with what you're doing, whether it's you're putting together a marketing document or building a web, you know, web front end or whatever. But the key thing is these skills are, even though Anthropic, who made Claude, created it, they are now supported in all the major platforms, you know, whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT, I believe, certainly GitHub Copilot, all the usual things. And like I said, it's very simplistic. It's easy to overlook how powerful these things are. And in this case, the one that I'm going to talk about is Impeccable, it's called. And in a recent-ish of the date of this recording anyway, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, Anthropic released a front-end skill. Okay, so because if you found that you just do your normal prompt, like, oh, I want to build a website, blah, 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 you'll notice it's probably going to have a purple gradient background. It's going to look very much like every other AI generated website because it just uses, you know, a common sort of template, if you like. But the front-end skill from Anthropic sort of made it a little bit more prescribed about, you know, what you should do, essentially. You know, use these, don't use these fonts. Don't just keep using Arial font or whatever, you know, do this. And there's a set of instructions ultimately. And by the way, skills are also important because they're progressively loaded. Okay. So because by now, most people know about the context window size and how many tokens it's costing you. You may not even realize that, but when you're sending prompts, and especially code or whatever, you know, to the AI, it's usually the prompt and then anything else underneath that you don't see. That's all in the context and getting passed to the AI and essentially getting charged for it. And to be honest, if you're using like a pro subscription or something like that of any one of these AIs, that's probably not a bad thing because you probably won't even notice it. But eventually, you know, you will start to see your token usage go up. So skills are very important because they're only loaded when a certain match of a command, say for instance, is encountered. Like if you mention about the fonts, you might have in your skills, you might have a technically a font command, for want of a better word, that will then load that and look at the instructions that it should use for fonts on your website. But the key bit is that Impeccable, I've forgotten the guy's name already, actually. I'll put the links below. But he took the Anthropic, where has it gone off my screen? Sorry about this. Very professional, this, you know. But anyway, he took the Anthropic front-end skills, but enhanced it and also added some anti-patterns, which are basically don't do this, don't do that, you know, because it's all those sort of things again with the purple backgrounds and cards on everything, and you know, it all looks just the same. So the guy that created this, and I will have a look for his name, I promise, is just enhanced this with, so there's the 17 design skills, and again, realistically, these are just a folder structure that you put into your project folder. And again, it doesn't have to be just code, you know, keep that in mind. It's not just for code. So so the idea is there's a section that goes through this. So if you're building, like I say, if you're a business or an individual, you want to build something a little bit more specific, then you can actually use this. And you've got sections like typography, color and contrast, layout and space, visual details, motion, responsiveness, and things like that. There's quite a few built-in skills that you can tweak actually, but you can also take what's there at the moment, and it will make sure that you get a bit of a cleaner front end actually, and a bit of repeatable front ends as well. So you've got a bit of consistency going on. Okay, so a few of the commands you've got, you know, audit, you know, which it'll perform a comprehensive audit of the interface quality across accessibility, performance, theming, and things like that. So it'll check anything that's being generated by AI. Does it sort of like adhere to these rules, if you like? Okay. But there's things like optimize, you know, it'll optimize things for loading. There's loads of other stuff. There's so much about, you know, using animations or like the consistency of how the design wants to look. But it's actually really good. And like I said, it's not like anything you have to code against as such. It's just a folder of skills with specific instructions that the guys put together. So if I go back, yeah, there's a GitHub repository. It's open source, this one. Basically it's what I'm trying to find is, yeah, is it Paul Backhouse? Yeah, Paul Bacchus. Anyway, you'll see it in the GitHub repository, but it's really well thought through actually, and especially for something that affects everything really, the visuals, the UI that you want to build. Like you go to Lovable or Replit, or even if you use, you know, Claude Code and things like that, you generally find when it starts to build UIs, they'll look really the same. And it makes mistakes and puts text in the wrong font and all this sort of stuff. So this is actually something worth looking at. And like I said, it's not just for code, you know. Well, this is, in fairness, but skills generally are not just for coding. So, but that's the bonus one for the weekend. If you're building anything like a web app or anything for yourself or as part of a business, then it's definitely worth having a look at skills in general, and certainly for UI stuff. Have a look at the Anthropic front end skill, and then Impeccable builds on top of that. So yeah, pretty useful. So anyway, that's what I've got. I will leave us all there and continue and hopefully have a good weekend, and we'll catch you on the next one.